Welcome, everybody. I'm Ambika Devi, and this is the 4 keys to a healthy diet. Now, I got a brilliant idea today that I probably should have named it Amplifying Your Health, because it seems using the word diet really freaked people out. That got them into some kind of fear that I was going to tell them to stop eating or stop eating what they really love. And that is not at all what this is about tonight. This is the kind of stuff I wish we were taught in kindergarten, the kind of information that I wish we were teaching our children, our friends, and our families, and the information that I am so happy to be sharing with all of you, because I did used to work as a university professor teaching holistic health. I ran student clinics. I wore a lab coat. I looked at samples of things and helped people to determine what was going on with their digestion, and also brought into it the mind and spirit connection, because body, mind, spirit is really where my focus is. So the whole idea of diet is a misconception. We hear the word diet, and I think it's been conditioned into us to think that diet is what goes on a plate and what we put in our mouths. But truly, it is the diet of what we take in everywhere. It is the entire physical environment and how that affects our physical environment of the body. But we also begin to learn and understand that what's going on inside of us affects our thoughts, it affects our emotions. We definitely can sense shifts in hormones from what we're eating and the external things that we take in. How do we measure this? Well, let's go back to the beginning of what is really going on here. What this is measured by certain markers. And I'm wondering if you can guess what they are, but don't worry, there's no pop quiz. I'm going to give it to you. There are 3 pillars of health according to Ayurveda. And in this entire program I'm giving to you tonight, I'm not just focusing on one style. You see, in my background, I have traditional Chinese medicine. I have American folk herbology. I have Ayurveda. I have natural hygiene, the eat right for your blood type diet. And we're going to cover all of these, as well as other things that I think you're going to find super fascinating. So we have 3 pillars of health. And I want you to imagine, and if you've got a journal nearby, you can write down what you think the 3 pillars of health might be. And it might surprise you what they are. These are how we can determine what our level of health is. Now, health is not just the body. It's the body, mind, and spirit. So there are things that can tell us whether we're running at optimum or we're in a challenge mode of some sort. Lifestyle is everything that is habitual, what we're eating, what we're choosing to do for exercise, what we're drinking. Are we drinking enough water? What we drink first thing in the morning, what we run through our thoughts. This is all part of our lifestyle. What is our environment like? Does it support what we are hoping for? And there is a difference between hope and expectation. We might eat some protein of choice, expecting to get energy from it, and then we don't. We might feel sluggish. We might eat some carbs expecting to bloat out or put on weight, and we don't. It actually fuels us. We might think that our lifestyle should be eating 3 square meals a day and 2 snacks, but that might not be what works for us, because there are different types of us. We're not like everybody else. Diet. I've already given you some clues about that. Diet is what we're taking into the mouth, into the body, but it's also feeding the skin. And the skin, the hair, and the nails are all part of a system called the integumentary system. These give us really clear indications of how we are doing. If our nails have a lot of ridges in them and they're brittle, if our hair is dropping more rapidly, I don't know about you, but I shed. And some of us shed more than others. If you've ever had a long-haired pet, then you know what shedding is all about. And shedding is okay because that makes room for more stuff. We shed skin cells all the time and we're not aware of it. And then there's sleep. Sleep is probably your best indicator of how you're doing. If you can sleep through the night without having to get up to pee multiple times, that's a really good indication of doing well. If you can sleep through the night, get up, have a really great pee and bowel movement, that is a double thumbs up. That is showing you that you are doing really, really well. If you feel tired after you have slept for anywhere from 4 to 8 or more hours, then something might not be as good as it could be. So you might wonder why you feel sluggish after you eat. Has anybody ever felt sluggish after you eat? Want to take a siesta or maybe a full-on nap or just can't move? That happens. And that could be happening from several different things. When I had the opportunity to learn from Peter Dodimo, who wrote the Eat Right for Your Blood Type book, my eyes really opened because in his first version of the book, he wrote a story about a rabbi that was very ill and suffering from a lot of difficulties. And the rabbi had a favorite meal, which was called kasha varnichikas. And that is bow tie pasta with buckwheat and chicken. Now, in the blood type diet, the philosophy is that certain foods affect blood in different ways. And I'll get into that a little further, but I want to explain the 4 blood types. There's only 4, and they are A, B, AB, and O. O is the universal donor. You might have heard about that because the other 3 blood types mutated from O-type blood. And the O, it's not a fancy Latin word. It stands for original, the original blood type. A is the agrarian blood type. B, we can think of as the mountain people, and AB is a mutation of A and B, also of O. In the very beginning of what Peter described in the blood type diet, he had a philosophy that he continued on studying and researching, that his grandfather and his father, who were both naturopaths like him, started looking at. And the philosophy was that different foods affect the different blood types in different ways. Some foods seem better for certain blood types. Now, if you've ever fallen into the idea of trying a diet that was out there in the media, certain diets come to mind, like the Atkins diet, where you drink a certain amount of water every day. Well, that's a good thing. But what about Fit for Life? Have you heard of Fit for Life? It was a lean and green diet where you only eat fruit in the morning, and then the rest of the day you're eating greens and proteins, preferably meat of a variety of kinds. Well, that is the perfect diet for a type O blood, but that would not be very good for a type A blood. You see, O's are the hunter-gatherers. They're the ones who do really well with high proteins and less starches. Whereas A stands for agrarian. They were the farmers. They can eat a lot more of the grains, but those red meats don't necessarily agree with them. B, the mountain people, well, up in the mountains, there aren't a lot of chickens or birds like that running around or flying around. And that type of blood doesn't do well with chicken at all, nor does it do well with the heavier pseudo grains like buckwheat. And that is what happened to the rabbi. The rabbi happened to have been B-type blood. His symptoms were arthritis, poor digestion, trouble sleeping. And the list went on and on of his troubles. Peter found out that he had B-type blood and said, look, I don't want you to stop eating it, but this is your favorite meal. You've been eating this meal every single day for dinner, and it's poisoning and toxifying you. So when the rabbi cut it out, he could go back to it once in a while, like a party, a celebration. But when he stopped having it as a steady diet, his symptoms dissipated. I found that story absolutely fascinating, and that's what sparked my attention to the blood type diet. At the time, I was a member of an acupuncture guild. I was studying as an acupuncturist before I met Peter. This was when his book came out. And the guild decided that we would each get a hold of the book, we would read it, we would discuss it on a regular basis, and we would split into our 4 blood type categories, and we would have study groups on the side and then come together as a larger unit and talk about it. I was in the A group. I happen to have A positive blood, and I'm not going to get into the positive negative part of blood. That's for another time. And it really doesn't affect the validity or the information that I'm giving you tonight. So in my A group, everybody was feeling great. They were like, wow, after our first 4 weeks, and we got back together, and I wasn't feeling so great. And in the book, Peter had written that this was good and valid for all but 18% of humanity. And so we in my group decided I was in that 18% that it didn't work for. Fast forward, I moved to Arizona. I start teaching at a small holistic college, which is university level for those of you watching in Europe. And Peter was teaching at the larger University of Holistic Health and Naturopathy. So I went to take classes with him to continue my education and keep my status and licensure. At that time, Peter had discovered that each of those 4 groups subdivided into 2 each, and he believed that he found the key to that missing link, the 18% that it wasn't working for. And it had to do with secretion. Now, we might know the word secretion as it relates to glands, because glands and organs, they do secrete. Hormones are a secretion of the endocrine organs. But this secretor level had to do with the bodily humors. The humors are everything that's liquid other than blood. So sweat, tears, lymph, sexual fluids, this and saliva. He realized that 18% of those 4 blood types, and it was of each blood type he was running into this, there were 18% of people who were not secreting their blood type, which is called the antigen, into their other fluids. So they're called non-secretors. And non-secretors are a little bit trickier. They're ninjas. It's said that in Asia, to be a ninja, you have to be a non-secretor because you don't leave your blood type at the scene unless there is blood. So if you sweat or there's other fluid, that makes you a hidden being. You can't type a person who's a non-secretor from their bodily fluids. Now you can, because Peter does a saliva test that you can get a hold of. So now there are ways, but back in the day, You couldn't type a person without their blood who was a non-secretor. And those 18% of people he then found had a slightly different dietary need and potential than all of their friends who were secretors. So for instance, using type A blood as an example, the type A secretors don't do well with any kind of potato, white or sweet. But a non-secretor, A, does really well with a sweet potato. And there is an application that you can get where you can put it on your phone and it will show you, you can set the secretor level after you've been tested and you know whether you're a secretor or non-secretor and you know what your blood type is. It's really easy to type your blood. That's something that you maybe did back in 7th grade in earth science. Maybe you remember, maybe you don't, but you can get a hold of a blood typing kit, super inexpensive. It's less than $20. You can get it on Amazon. You can now order the secretor test. It's just like a DNA test. First thing in the morning, you spit in a tube, you wrap it up, you send it, and a couple weeks later, you have your results. This is a lifesaver and a game changer for so many people who are struggling with difficulties with a variety of diseases, as well as weight issues and also other issues. Now, Peter was the very first person who ever showed me and talked to me about parasites. Parasites are an issue that we don't hear about in Western medicine. I first learned about parasites when I was growing up. I grew up with horses, dogs, and cats on a very small gentleman's farm. And twice a year, our vet, who was also the horse dentist, would come and sand the horse's teeth down, and he would administer worming medicine or antiparasitics to the cats, the dogs, and the horses. And the horses never fussed when he was there. And I noticed this. And I remember being about 9 years old and asking him, when are you going to do me? And he laughed and he said, well, but why would I need to? And I thought, now that I look back on it, I think, wow, I did need to, because years later, I discovered that I had one of these in me. This beauty with what looks like calligraphy on it is a human tapeworm. And this particular type can grow to the width of your large intestine so that your intestine stops absorbing the water and your ability to really move your bowel properly gets hindered in a really heavy-duty bad way. These images over here show you some of the ways that these critters can barb into you and cling on to you. And there are many, many different types. There are flukes that look like flounders. And there are pin and thread worms. Now, with little kids, we do hear about pinworms. And they cause itching, a lot of itching. So little kids, it's more common to worm them or deworm them. But why? Why do we know about lice and worms for little kids, and then at some point, as we're growing up, it stops, and we stop talking about it? I don't know. I think this is really sad that we aren't being taught this. Back in the 90s, I was still suffering. I had gone through all different types of protocols for parasite issues. Once you get one blown out of proportion, it's not unusual for others to have an easier time with you. We hear about alkalinity versus acidity in the body, but we're not being told that a lot of the reason why we're acidic isn't necessarily from what we're putting in our mouths and eating, but as a result of these parasites and their die-off. They tend to be more active at the full moon and new moon times. And at one part of the moon, at the full moon, they're usually procreating. At the new moon, they're usually depositing thousands and thousands and thousands of eggs, which turn into larvae and grow. We learn to live with them. Some live in our skin and hair all the time, and they're not really causing issues, but the ones that are in our organs do cause issues. And thankfully, in more recent times, I have discovered a product that's so easy to take. It's not nasty. And from years of experimentation on myself and finally getting clear of it, I do feel confident recommending this to my private clients. And it is something that I like to coach people through one-on-one, because you need a lot of hand-holding. And if you're brave, I like to look at pictures of what's coming out of you so I can analyze it. But you have to remember, I worked in a lab. I was analyzing this stuff anyway, and a picture doesn't smell. So I really want to help, and I want to be able to identify it, because sometimes right before you purge something, you feel icky. And I want to be there to hold your hand. And I want to be there to let you know that you're okay and you're going to get through it. And really, with this product that I found, it's amazing. And if you want to know more about that, definitely come to me and take advantage of a discount session with me, because I'll give you all of these links in that session so that you can get started. But I don't want you to just run out and try and do this on your own without my support and knowledge. I'm going to move on from parasites now to another topic, because we're not just going with one direction here, but we're going to go into Ayurveda. Because another thing that could be making us sluggish, remember that's where this all got started, was why do I feel tired or sluggish after I eat? And in Ayurveda, which is an introduction in my second book, Unfolding Happiness, we learned that there are 3 main doshas, and they have to do with the 5 elements of fire, water, earth, air, and space. Pitta is fire and water. Most people are Pitta. That's the greatest portion of humans. So now we've got another layer to those 3 blood types with their 3 sub, whether they're secretor or non-secretor, and we're putting another layer on it, everybody. Then we've got Vata. Vata is air and ether. And Kapha, which people often, you'll hear them pronounce it Kapha. It's actually Kapha with an aspirated H. Kapha is water and earth. In my book, Unfolding Happiness, which you can easily find on Amazon and my website, you will have a test to show you what your current state is, dosha-wise, and what your original state was when you came into this body. And then it becomes more easy to understand how to begin to harmonize it. And I want you to think about this as harmonizing rather than balancing. So it's a pendulum that's constantly moving and swinging rather than black and white. I'm on, I'm off, I'm good, I'm bad. Because if you're like me, what's going on in your life emotionally, physically, and also with what you're eating, how you slept, you're bathing, this is all going to affect what you're feeling. There are certain recommendations that are more for Pitta. For instance, and I'm just going to give you a little bit so you understand this more. Pitta, which is fire and water, well, that's like hot water. It's like steam. So we don't want to throw more heat on it. So hot chili peppers may not be the best thing for a Pitta, especially if they're aggravated or suffering from something. So a Pitta who is more aggravated could possibly create an ulcer. Pittas need 3 square meals a day. Remember, I was talking about the Fit for Life diet? pittas can digest that kind of stuff really quick. And they're going to do really well with 3 regimented meals at perfect timing. Vata, which is air and ether or space, needs to eat little meals all through the day. Maybe you have a friend like that who starts going down for the count energetically and brain function wise, and they are always carrying little bags of snacks. That's their thing. That's how they need to eat. 7, 9 meals a day of little bits just to keep going, because they have air, which moves a lot of the energy through the body. It is the element of air and ether or space. So they need to be more grounded. And then kapha. One of the jokes about kapha is you can just skip a meal, go outside in the sun, get a little bit of sunshine, eat some sunshine. If you're like me, because I am naturally very kapha in the body, that I can skip meals. I can eat once a day, but for a period of time. And this will also go along with the 3 body types as per the Western view, which I will share with you in just a little bit. So what we understand now about kapha, because they're water and earth, they need less matter. It doesn't mean they don't need to eat water. Everybody needs to bathe. It's great to bathe first thing in the morning and late in the evening. You'll sleep better if you rinse off. You don't have to get all into washing your hair. You can, a little bit in the armpits and the crotch area is a good idea. That those areas tend to gather some bacteria, but just a rinse off. You don't have to soap your whole body up. And then to oil yourself, because oiling your body is even more important, and using the right oil. And the way we figure out the right oil is from your blood type. However, olive oil, real olive oil, pure olive oil that is organic is going to be your best bet if you don't know. Because, for instance, in Ayurveda, sesame oil is recommended for a lot of things, but B-type blood doesn't do well with sesame oil. So we need to learn these things. Now, there are subdoshas. There's a dominant dosha and a subdosha. So we could, and you'll find this out in the test in my book. It will give you the results of what your main one is and what your antar or your subdosha is. And then there's a rare case when you're tridoshic, meaning you have almost a balance of all 3. Now, go figure. I'm a non-secretor, A-type blood, who's also tridoshic. Makes it even more tricky to figure out what to eat and what to do. It also makes things change and fluctuate more. So the fact that I have found my way to a more harmonious place tells me that I'm onto something, that I've really figured it out. Now, when it comes to satiety, which means being satisfied, Ayurveda does have some really good information for us on this. And it has to do with the 6 tastes. And this is just an example of what the 6 tastes are. We've got salty, which should make sense. Salt is salty, but so is seafood. Anything from the ocean is part salty. So I'm going to give you the obvious, but then we also have to take into consideration that there would be some subgroups here. Then we've got sweet. Well, sugar makes sense to be sweet, but all fruits potentially have sweet. Anything that turns to a sugar in the bloodstream, like a grain, is sweet. But here's some things you may not know. Meat is sweet. Oil is sweet. So there are a lot of sweet foods that we tend to use. Sour makes sense when we think of citrus. Lemons are definitely sour. Grapefruit is definitely sour. Tomato is considered sour, but is also a little bit sweet. So are the sour fruits. They're a little bit sweet. Pungent, a lot of times people like to use the example of onion. Well, hot peppers is shown in this group. So we know those are hot. So, oh, wow. These 6 tastes also have temperature. Are they hot or cool? So an oil would be more warming. Think of when you eat oily food like cheese. It warms you. It's comforting, right? Comfort food is warming and sweet. But the one I like to use as an example for pungent is horseradish. That's a real obvious pungent flavor. Astringent. Well, we've got pomegranate and cilantro. Some people have a huge aversion to cilantro. They cannot stand it at all. And that's understandable because it doesn't agree. And this is also shown in DNA, if you've ever ventured into looking at DNA. So for astringent, my favorite vegetable to offer you to bring astringent into your choices is cauliflower. Cauliflower is a great astringent food. And it is also a great substitute for potatoes. Now think about giving up potatoes. Not everybody wants to think of that. But it's also really important to think about, well, what are you putting on the potatoes that's making them comfort food, that's making them happy for you? Is it butter? Is it ghee? Is it cheese? I'm not against that. I'm not talking vegan versus vegetarian versus carnivore at all, because I also understand that within those blood types, there's different choices that work better for different people. And it's really important to understand who you are and how that works for you. Let's look at the body types. You may have heard of these. You may have been classified as one. Maybe someone called you one. Endomorph, mesomorph, or ectomorph. An endomorph is what we see on the left, a bigger body. There's nothing wrong with being an endomorph, except in fashion magazines. They're being a little bit more accepted. But what we also have to understand is an endomorph is healthier when they've got a little bit more weight on them. And it's not unusual for an endomorph to have a propensity of kapha, of earth and water. A mesomorph is a little bit more lean, more muscular, able to move around. I used myself as the example in this picture. This is actually a group of dancers that I used to dance with. And then we've got the ectomorph. Well, we could classify the ectomorph as a vata. A lot of vatas are ectomorphic. They're thin, they're a little more fragile. They move around a lot. They get stressed out easy. Their digestion gets weirded out easy. They might have a propensity towards a Crohn's type disease. And these are things to consider, that it might not just be that they're more vata and they're an ectomorph, but it could also be the choices of what they're eating. Is it all making sense? I'm hoping to everybody. Am I fascinating you? I hope. I haven't put anyone to sleep yet. That's awesome. So now we know, okay, we've got another layer. We've got these body types, and there are windows of optimum time for eating within those 3 body types. The kapha mesomorph and the ectomorph doesn't need to eat 3 square meals a day. They can skip. If they don't want to eat breakfast, that's great. If you're familiar with intermittent fasting, that's not taking the entire day and entire night off and fasting. As a matter of fact, I don't really recommend long fasts. They're debilitating to your body. I've seen what it can do. And those cleanses where people are using hot pepper and oil and lemon. Okay, usually olive oil, lemon is great. Hot pepper may not be for everybody. And that could really do some damage to the internal organs, especially if they lean towards pitta. They could be burning themselves up and doing some permanent damage. So we have to be careful. Remember, it's the vata, the ectomorph that needs to eat all throughout the day. I wouldn't really recommend to the vata type or the ectomorph to fast, but guess what? They're the ones that tend to eat salad. cold food, which makes them more cold in the digestive tract. And then they wonder why they have situations where they have diarrhea all the time, because they're not really digesting. And then the ectomorph who is trying to behave and be good and eat those 3 square meals a day and just can't seem to get any lean muscle build and tends to carry around weight because they're eating too much. They're eating more than they need to eat. And the mesomorph, well, we have to look at some of the other factors to see how we can keep the muscles built. And there are things that I would do with you in private sessions to really determine what have you been doing up until now? How do you test out in the doshas? What's your blood testing out as? What's your blood type? What's your secretor level? And then we can make little tiny adjustments. But really, the first place I usually begin is with a parasite cleanse, and actually quite a long one. What would be considered a double? Because if you've never done it, that's where we do need to begin. I'm hoping I haven't overwhelmed you yet. Now, there's something else that I was taught way back in the day from a barefoot doctor that I used to shadow. I traveled around with him. I went to patient calls with him. A barefoot doctor used to take his bag with him and go to people's houses. Can you imagine that? Doctors who came and made house calls, and that was normal. What happened to our medical system? It's become AI driven. We're meeting on Zoom. Well, okay, I kind of get it. But when I was trained in acupuncture and when I taught things like reflexology, aromatherapy, massage therapy, joint manipulation, and pathology, one of the things that I was taught and that I taught my students was to diagnose using your senses, your sense of touch. Well, in Zoom, I can't touch you. I have to have you palpate your body. That means push and press. And then I have to hope I'm getting the info that I want. I have to smell you, not your poo, but I have to smell your body. Back in the day, doctors used to taste your urine before there were lab tests. That's how they could determine pregnancy and hormone issues. How about that? Now, I never had to taste anybody's excrement, thankfully, but one of my weapons, because in Oriental medicine, just like in martial arts, we are given 3 weapons. One of mine was listening to my client's body as well as what they're telling me. One of my weapons was palpation, touch, and my strongest weapon, my number 1 weapon, is smell. So it's very frustrating that I can't smell people through Zoom, because that's taking away my most powerful tool. But let's look at this, at food combining. Now we've got another layer of how to choose what I'm eating. This is not telling you what to eat, what not to eat, but is showing you how things combine. So when we look at the fruits at the bottom, we can see there are 3 classifications of fruit: acid, subacid, and sweet. Subacid and sweet mix nicely together. Acid and subacid, they don't mix nicely together. If we're eating a classification of fruit, we need to stick with that classification. If it's acid fruit, only acid fruit. You can mix other acid fruits like citrus and pineapple. You can mix pineapple and strawberry, but it's not a good idea to throw apple and grapes in there. And with sweet fruits, it's not a good idea to mix anything but sweet fruits together. Excuse me. If you're like me and your favorite fruit is berries, you're in luck. Pretty much all berries mix well together. But there's something that we're not seeing on this chart, and it's melon. There's an old proverb: eat melon alone or leave it alone. Now, I don't know about you, but I grew up in situations where there was fruit salad. And I still see fruit salad available in grocery stores, even at the healthier grocery stores. And I still see a mishmash of the different classifications of fruits mixed together. I dare you to experiment eating only a single classification of fruit for a while, and then go back and try the mix. You will notice the difference. The thing about when you start eating your foods combined properly, you start eating the foods that are right for your blood type, you start eating highly beneficial choices, because Peter does divide the foods for each blood type within the secretor level into highly beneficial, neutral, and avoid. It doesn't mean you can't eat avoid foods, but what Peter said that really sparked me to understand is, somebody asked him in class one day, well, Peter, what about when you go on vacation? You know, I know you were just at a resort on an island. You couldn't have possibly have been able to stick to your own mapping when you were there. And he said, yeah, you're right. When I travel, I don't really pay much attention to it. You can do what you want. You can be fussier if you want. But if something's going on with your body, if you've been diagnosed with a disease, if you're not feeling great, if you're sluggish, if your food is not digesting well, then you might want to pay attention to this stuff. So if you're feeling great, you can ignore it. But I will tell you from personal experimentation, when I don't eat what I know works for me, I can feel off for several days. I can get headaches from it. That's me. I'm super sensitive. Remember, I'm tridoshic. I'm a non-secretor. There are things that can throw me off hour to hour. But fortunately, I'm very kapha when it comes to food. I don't have to eat that much. Trust me, I like to eat. I am a foodie. So when we look at this food combining chart, we can see that proteins and starches don't really mix well together. They don't digest well. So if we want to eat starchy, we're going to do a little bit better with starchy vegetables and oily foods. And if you like cheese, I like cheese. I tend to eat the type of cheese that works better for me, which is sheep milk oriented rather than cow milk oriented. It might be different for you. For instance, B-type blood can pretty much eat all the cheeses. They are free to eat many of them, but they have a hard time with legumes. Certain legumes cause a lot of trouble. When I was a clinician, I saw a lot of difficulty in digestion due to the wrong oils, the wrong proteins, and especially the wrong legumes. So we can see here on this chart that there are very specifics, and these are minimal. If you have questions about, well, what kind of food this is, you can usually Google it and look it up. So don't worry. Let's go back to satiety. In Ayurveda philosophy, when we cup our hands together and make a bowl, that's the portion we should eat. And a lot of us overeat. Some of us are used to cooking for more than one person. And then when we find ourselves living alone, we're still cooking for two people, and then we're eating it all. Ayurveda doesn't really want us to eat leftovers. It prefers that we cook in the moment. There are certain things we can prepare in advance. Certain things will last in the fridge. But the whole idea of cooking at the beginning of the week, each day that food is waiting, it's losing power. It's losing energy and vitality. So for satiety, it's really, really important that we're only eating what we can fit in our hands, and that we're learning to add in all of those flavors. If we have something from each of these groups, a little astringent, a little bitter, a little salty, a little sweet, a little sour, a little pungent in every meal that we're eating, we're going to be satisfied. When we're missing something, and you'll notice this, if you crave something sweet after you eat, It's probably because there wasn't enough of the sweet element or one of the other elements in your food. I would wager a guess it's one of the other tastes that wasn't in there. And we're also conditioned in modern society that I deserve dessert after I eat my food, so that's part of it as well. We have to understand that back in history, not everybody could afford meat or had access to meat for every single meal. Also, in South America, there were pseudo grains being used more and before rice. So quinoa, amaranth, and pseudo grains behave a little bit differently than the starches. I'm not saying don't eat rice with meat, but maybe try to eat a meal that's just lean and green. Most people, you say eat greens and they might think iceberg lettuce. Well, let's go back to the idea of parasites for a moment, because most people think they are immune and don't have any parasites to worry about. How many ways, hold your fingers up on one hand, how many ways do you think you can contract parasites from 1 to 5? Show me how many fingers. 5. Yeah, you're right. 10. So we can contract parasites through pets, which should make sense because we know we need to worm the pet. We need to deworm the pet, right? So it's pretty obvious we could pick them up from a pet of any sort or any animal, right? Then we can pick them up from food. That's why we wash our food. And it's really good to wash your food in specific ways so you make sure you're removing them. I mean, if you buy organic vegetables or something at a farmer's market, I'm sure you've seen bugs and things that came off of it when you were washing it, even if you're just rinsing it, right? Some people like to wash their veggies in vinegar. I don't recommend that, or lemon, because that is so much more intense than you need. I tend to use food grade hydrogen peroxide. One, because vegetables really like it. It's like plant food. And you can do an experiment. I dare you. Take a bunch of parsley, or if you like cilantro that's kind of wilted, cut the ends off, put some hydrogen peroxide in water, and leave that parsley or cilantro in there for a couple hours. It will look like you just picked it. You can revive sad-looking vegetables. There are bacteria that happen on the surface of foods. So there are companies that sell soap to wash your food in. Again, I don't really want soap on my food. So I have found that food grade hydrogen peroxide works the best. Where do you get it? Well, if you have a water treatment system in your house, which I hope you do, because water is another way you can get parasites. So far, we've got pets, food, and now water. Well, guess what? Your body absorbs more water when you're bathing than what you're drinking. You might not know that. That's why it's so important to rinse off in the morning and the evening. We rinse off in the morning to rinse the sleep off of us. The body does a lot of detoxing during the night when you're sleeping. And so that morning wash off is important. It's also nice to do after you move your bowel. Then you know you're clean in all your spots, right? And you might want to use some soap in the morning. But you don't have to lather everywhere. You can go behind your knees, your armpits, your elbow creases, the back of your neck, and the whole crack around where all your important reproductive organs and organs of expelling are, or the magic gates, I like to call them. So water is so important to keep clean. I live in an area where my only choice is city treated water. So coming into my house, I have a giant carbon filter that the water first goes through. This removes gross, meaning larger impurities. Then it runs through a UV light. This will kill parasites and microorganisms. Then it comes into the house. And so all of the spigots in the house now are giving me water that's cleaner than what most people are drinking. Then my drinking water runs through another UV light just in case there was some stuff in the pipes or it didn't get picked up. And then it goes through a series of reverse osmosis filters. And then it goes through another carbon filter at the end, which puts a little bit of mineral back in the water and flavor, because there is a flavor to good water. You know this if you've ever tried to drink distilled water. It's meh. It's not satisfying because it's missing the minerals. Some people use a liquid mineral to put in their water. Well, if you're traveling, you might want to do that if you're stuck and all you can get a hold of is bottled water. But I have a device that I take traveling with me that will take puddle water and make it pure and potable. And if you want to know about that, just send me a message and I'll give you a link to their site, because I'm not about pushing product here tonight. But anything that you're like, what was that thing? You know, because I take that. I don't know if you've ever been on a cruise ship, but I take that on cruise ships with me. And then I don't have to buy bottled water. I feel safe taking the water out of their filter system in the dining room, squeezing it through my filter, and then using it. And definitely any hotel tap water, I feel safe drinking it, and it tastes great. I've tested it on many, many people in different countries, and they all say, wow, your water's great. And I said, well, it started from the tap. You know, of course, I'll start with the best source. So we've got pets, food, water, contact with other human beings, shaking hands, giving a hug. They can pass on parasitic eggs and larvae that way to us. Lovely. And then the fifth way, the air. Think of it this way. There are wild animals everywhere, right? Everything from little tiny creatures to bigger creatures. Where I live, there's even panthers. And those creatures all poop. And their poop dries in the sun, and then the wind blows. And guess what we're breathing? So if you think you are safe from the idea of never having a parasite, well, you might have been blessed with a really high level of hydrochloric acid in your system, which will kill a lot of it. But it's likely you got some hanging around and you've learned to live with them. They become like friends. So when you start to get rid of them, you can go through different emotions that make you feel sad and frustrated. But I'll tell you, when you have worked with me, which Lindsay is newly working with me, and she will definitely let you know, I'll let her talk in a little bit to share some of her story of what she's been experiencing over these last, I think it's only been about 6 weeks that we've been working together. And it was Lindsay's idea of, you know, I want to learn this stuff after 3 days of me helping her. She said, you should do a class. So that's why we're here. That's why we're doing this. Okay, now we know parasite cleansing is a thing we should probably pay attention to. How do you, once it's up in your nostrils, it's in your sinuses, your brain is nearby. I'm just saying. So yes, it is true. If our body is more alkaline, it is less apt for these things to be able to take hold. So if we keep a very alkaline diet, but then, if we're traveling, visiting our in-laws and they're feeding us dessert, that's blowing that right there. That just made us acidic. And it behooves us to do at least a spring or autumn cleaning, and depending on your body type, one or the other might be better. Spring cleaning is great for certain types, and autumn or winter cleaning is really great for other types. So, but at any point, a cleaning is good if you've never done it. As we get older, teeth can be challenged. Part of that is DNA. Aging is part of it. There are, I come from a long line of denture wearers. I'm about to be 64. When I was a kid, I had banded braces. And even before that, my parents had me drilled a lot. So I am at that phase where I've had to let go of a couple teeth. And, I'm okay. But at some point, I might need to get some implants in order to chew. The good news is I love mushy food. I love porridge. I love soup. I love mashed. I'm okay with that. It doesn't make me feel less of a person. But some people, they don't do well with that. They don't like saucy food. And I do wonder about countries that lean into that kind of food, like Ethiopia and India, or even Hungary. There's a lot of saucy kind of thick stewy food. I like that a lot. Maybe it's part of my blood type and my dosha that does that. Because as I said earlier, my blood type, type A, is lower on hydrochloric acid, which is what the stomach uses to break food down, which makes sense why I'm not really a meat eater. You need a lot of hydrochloric acid to break that stuff down. You chew and chew and chew, but you still need it. Khichdi and lentils are great. Khichdi is considered a food that is so gentle on your system. It's equivalent to fasting. So the most mild version of fasting would be khichdi, and the most mild form of a cleanse would be taking a few ounces of castor oil in the morning, enjoying your time on the porcelain throne, clearing out, and then eating blended soup or khichdi. And khichdi is a lentil and rice, and lentils and rice, they do mix fine together. Although in our protein grain idea, we have to understand that certain legumes, which are lentils, work well for some people and certain do not. Mung beans, which is traditionally what khichdi is made out of, are generally good for all the blood types, which is good news. Although they do better with navy beans. I do have a lot of this memorized. Don't let it freak you out. It's just from years of helping people with diet and remembering what worked. I mean, I can tell you a story. I had an O-type blood client who was a yogi. She was a little Vata yogi. And she used to suffer. When I met her, she had an ulcer that she was told it was about to become a bleeding ulcer, which is the worst type of ulcer. She was also, she had an antardosha of pitta, of fire. So she would get upset. So her nature was vata, air and space, but that fire and water. And she was in a job she didn't want to be in anymore, which was aggravating the situation. And she loved Indian food. She had been to India many times. She had a tendency to make friends with people who owned Indian restaurants. And she would go eat on the buffets. If you've ever been at a bigger Indian restaurant, they tend to have buffets, sometimes both meals, lunch and dinner. And then she would be sick, like she had the flu for a couple days after. She would be puking. She was awful. And she wasn't putting it together that it was what she was eating that was aggravating her. She was just blaming it on the ulcer situation and her unhappiness with her job, which was definitely contributing. So I begged her, test your blood. Let's see what you are. And lo and behold, she was O. And she was eating all these lentils off of that buffet that were not right for her. And she was a vegetarian. She didn't want to eat meat. And after really looking at it and the secretor level, she tested for that also. So we could really see what would be highly beneficial, what would be neutral, what would be avoid. She realized she was eating a lot of the foods that would be best off to avoid. Now, if you really want to test it out, once you realize what your secretor level is and what your blood type is, I dare you, take 3 days and only eat highly beneficial foods for those 3 days. Only 3 days. It's going to blow your mind. And especially if you're using food combining in addition to it, you will turn your whole situation around in 3 days. It is amazing what will occur. So I wrestled her into doing that. And actually, the question just came in, lentils on the avoid for type O. Well, again, it depends on the secretor level, but most O's do well with chickpeas, garbanzo beans, which makes sense why they're in why those are part of the Mediterranean diet, because a lot of O's are from that part of the world. But for A, garbanzos are not a good bean. They're not a good lentil. So you really we have to look at what you are. It's really hard to blanket this in a discussion, which is why I want to work with you one-on-one, because I'd love to just say, eat this, don't eat that. But that's exactly what I was saying when I was letting people know I was doing this today, that it wasn't about eat this, don't eat that, that it's about what I want you to know before you start figuring out what you want to eat, and then how you want to combine it, and then think about who might be getting your nutrition from inside of you before your body does. The parasites, because they're robbing you of your nutrition. Vata, I wrestled her into eating just highly beneficial from what she could choose from, what she felt okay from. And all of those flu-like symptoms went away. The ulcer went away. And then she said to me one day, I think I do realize that I would get more energy if I would eat meat. And she learned how to hunt with a bow and arrow so she could get her own meat. That was the only way she felt good about it. I mean, that's an extreme story, but it does show you that over time, when you give it a chance and you experiment with it, and remember what Peter said, I know I've said it a few times, if nothing's wrong, just ignore it. But if something's going on, and I don't know, I'm pretty sure you agree with me, 3 days of flu-like symptoms, vomiting, headaches, and indigestion, that's a reason that something's going on, that there is something that needs to be looked at and paid attention to. Lindsay, you ready to share? Anybody else have a question? Mary or Kata? Anything else you wanted to input? Okay, I'm going to let Lindsay share. So Lindsay came to me. We've been friends for a long time. And I didn't know about all the symptoms she had been suffering from. I'll let her tell you about them. And I'll let you also tell us, Lindsay, what brought us to this point.
Okay, well, hello. I am a caretaker to my disabled mom. She lives here with me, my husband, and my almost 13-year-old son, who is on the autism spectrum, and we homeschool. We run a little homestead type thing. We've got some chickens and a cat. I had suffered from severe anxiety attacks, migraines daily, and I just always put it on the fact that I'm constantly stressed. You know, we run 2 home businesses, and I'm always busy doing things with my community. And I'm always the last one who, you know, I crawl into bed at night and I can't even sleep because I'm trying to think of what I'm doing tomorrow. Anyway, on September 10th, it was a Sunday last month, I had made dinner for my family. And after eating, I went and immediately sat on the couch like I did every time I would eat dinner. And then I started feeling very strange. And Ambika can attest to this. I don't like doctors. I have severe white coat syndrome, and it's been years since I have seen a practitioner. Well, I started feeling very strange. And I remember looking at my husband and saying, something is wrong with me. I don't know what it is, but I don't feel right. And about a half hour after that, I started shivering uncontrollably. Now I'm 46 years old and I'm always going through hot flashes. So for me to just start shivering, but I wasn't cold, I wasn't hot, and I didn't have a fever. So that was like the weirdest symptom. And then after, it lasted about a half hour, 40 minutes. And after that, like I still didn't feel right, but I was like, I'm just going to go to bed and sleep it off. So the next morning, September 11th, I got up and I did not feel any better. I felt worse. I couldn't eat. I couldn't think. I had a migraine. I was just like, leave me alone. I don't know what's wrong with me. My husband was at work. My mom and my son were home. And I just kind of shut them away into the living room while I went into the bedroom and just like cried because I didn't know what was wrong. That evening, my husband and I left to take my son to Taekwondo. And on the way there, I said, I want you to drop him off and then take me to the emergency room and just leave me there and then come back and get him. You know, he's there with friends, he'll be fine. And so that's what my husband did. He took me to the emergency room and they ran a bunch of tests. At this point, I couldn't feel my legs or my feet, they were numb. I was having chest pains. I was having, like, here, my solar plexus area, lots of pain and tightness. But at this point, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm having a heart attack. So they ran all the tests in the emergency room, and turns out I'm diabetic. My blood sugar level was at 326. Now, considering I hadn't eaten anything that day, so I'd been fasting pretty much the whole day since dinner the night before, we can only imagine how much higher it was when everything started making me feel very ill. When the doctor diagnosed me there, they gave me a bag of fluids and a prescription for a common drug used for diabetes and told me to find a primary care doctor because I didn't have one, so I could follow up along with an endocrinologist. So here, since I have white coat syndrome, I don't have health insurance. And I'm freaking out because what are these bills going to cost, you know? Anyway, it turns out the medication was very cheap, cash pay, but I didn't want to take it. I don't want to take it. I agreed to take it to get out of a crisis level, but as soon as I was able to, I contacted my good friend Ambika and I said, I need your help. And I explained to her, I want to do this as naturally as I can. What can I do? And she asked me if I'd ever done a parasite cleanse. Nope, never done parasite cleanse. So I'm currently on a parasite cleanse. And I will tell you, I think it was 3 days after being on it, maybe the 4th day. I have not had one migraine since then. And this was a daily occurrence that, like, it was debilitating certain times, days. Like, I couldn't stand light. I had to be in a dark room, ice on the head, the whole 9 yards. I have not had one anxiety attack, which is crazy because I would have constant anxiety attacks after my son was diagnosed when he was 4. He'll be 13 in December. So after, like, I want to say like 3-4 days, I'm saying to myself, I haven't had a migraine. I haven't had anxiety. I don't want to tell anybody because I'm going to jinx it. You know, like something's going on, but I don't want to tell anybody. So I think it was at the 2-week mark, I said to Ambika, I need to share this with you. And luckily I have not jinxed myself because still migraine free, still anxiety free. I'm more energetic. I feel better. I look better. My skin looks better. Ambika can attest. My husband changed out the light bulbs in the bathroom, and we all know how bright they are after that. And I said, oh my gosh, I look like I'm gray. And my friends were like, no, you're not gray. You're fine. And I said to Ambika, I said, I felt like I was gray. She said, you were gray. So I'm seeing a lot of different results. My eyes were getting really blurry, which explains the diabetes explains that. But my eyesight is starting to clear up. I mean, I'm blind anyway, but like even with my glasses, it was blurry. Now it's not as blurry. I can focus. Whenever I did a task before, I'd have to sit down and catch my breath. Oh, that's the other thing. I'm asthmatic and I haven't had to use my asthma medicine since about the 15th of September. Like it's like night and day. I've lost over 10 pounds. Haven't been doing anything except changing my diet. I've been eliminating the white stuff like potatoes and rice, which hurts because I love potatoes. But Ambika's also been coaching me on what to eat while I'm waiting for the secretor test. I did the blood test so I could find out that I am also A positive. I don't know what my secretor is yet. I'm still waiting on that. So we'll find out. that app, the four to eat for the four blood types. I have an Android, and it was, I want to say $4. So yeah, exactly, $4 for something that I always have with me on my telephone that never leaves my side. It's a great investment. So Ambika has asked me to do another round of the she's asked me to do another round of the parasite cleanse. So I'll have 2 rounds in me. And then I guess we'll see from there.
Because there's been so many times that people have come to me at stage 4 cancer and there's nothing I can do. But think back, Lindsay, because when Lindsay came to me and told me she was diagnosed with diabetes, I said, Lindsay, it's a parasite issue. And do you remember what you said, Lindsay? You blurted out, oh my gosh, I remember you saying that to me in the past. Now, we had never discussed her having diabetes in the past, but somehow I guess we had talked about it, because I do try to slip it in on people, you know, because I want my friends to be healthy. But before you do anything, I do feel that it's a good idea to do it, to do a cleanse. Why I suggested a double layer, because the cleanse that Lindsay's doing is a 4-week. And really, if it's your first time doing it, it's always a good idea to do 2 moons. Now, she happened to receive the product in the mail right before the full moon, which is perfect. I mean, the optimum would be start at new moon, go through full moon, and then go through new moon again. But it's perfectly acceptable to hit them on full moon, then new moon, then full. It's up to you if you want to go another new moon. Why? If you think back to what I said earlier, is they tend to copulate during the full moon and they tend to deposit eggs during the new moon. So there are herbs that you can add in your diet that are helpful and supportive. If you're not eating clove, oregano, and thyme on a regular basis, start putting that in your food. Turmeric is excellent for inflammation, but if you're using turmeric without something that will help open the blood vessel, it's pretty much just going through you. This is why a lot of the Ayurvedic recipes call for black pepper, but black pepper is not necessarily great for type A blood. But guess what? Coffee is. Coffee's great for type A blood. Yes, you get to have coffee, Lindsay. So a brew that I like is to put turmeric in with coffee. And if you don't want the caffeine, use some water, Swiss water processed decaf. And then you can have it at the end of the day instead of dessert, because guess what? The combination of clove, turmeric, and coffee will create instant satiety after a meal. So you don't have to have the caffeine. If you do like tea, green tea, black tea, kukicha tea, which is the twigs, these are all excellent. Tea is very astringent. Tea is a great astringent choice to get that astringency in you. Did we miss anything? I do have the diary I have of yours here, because another thing I do ask clients to do is keep a diary of what's going in and what's going out. I have learned that I have to keep the diary. I just need them to check in with me every day. But the issue began on September 12th. On September 19th, Lindsay went to see a regular practitioner who is supposedly holistic, but we haven't fully given that practitioner Lindsay did tell her she was going to be doing a parasite cleanse that was being overseen by a retired health practitioner. That would be me. On the 28th of September, not that long ago, everybody, Lindsay started the parasite cleanse. And then she did report into me some change in what was coming out of her. We definitely identified some larvae in a photo the other day. A lot of them. And then just through description, although I did get a visual, we have also identified liver flukes that are being passed. She did feel it. I mean, tell them what you felt a couple days ago when you felt the last dying breath of the liver flukes.
Oh gosh, it's terrifying when she talks about it. And it's even worse when she's like, well, what? Did it have a face? I'm like, stop asking me this. It's disgusting. But I did and I don't know my anatomy, but over here to the right.
Right side is liver, and then more towards the center of the top of the gut, where the transverse colon is the gallbladder.
Okay, so that was like near the gallbladder area. I felt, and the best way I could explain it was like when I was pregnant and I felt the baby kicking. I felt that there. It didn't hurt. It wasn't painful, but it was like almost like a gurgling or a burping. Like I could definitely feel that there was something there moving and it wasn't me doing it voluntarily. It was weird. And I didn't even think anything of it really at the time. I was like, oh, that's kind of strange, but you know, whatever. My body's going through lots of things. And then I released it and it was disgusting, but it came out. And before, like, I was laying in bed and last night it happened. I was laying in bed and I was like, oh my gosh, I've got like this really bad pain all of a sudden. I don't know what's wrong. I probably have to go to the bathroom. So I kind of manipulated my stomach area, my bowels, and all that. And then I had to go to the bathroom. And on the way there, I felt like I had the flu, like a stomach flu. It was like, well, everybody knows what that feeling is. And then afterwards, I felt like a new person. Like, I don't even want to go to bed right now, you know, and it was like midnight. That's the other thing I forgot to mention. Before my diagnosis and speaking with Ambika, I was up every night 3 to 4 times minimum to go to the bathroom to pee, maybe 5 times even. And who can go back to sleep like that? Like it was like 2 hours here and there. I now sleep at least 8 to 9 hours uninterrupted. And it's just been a matter of a couple of weeks. It's completely crazy. It's mind blowing. Okay, I'm muting.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this honestly. Now, what I want you to know, everybody, is what Lindsay was feeling was not necessarily a creature dying, but her body got the strength to disconnect it from her tissue. And they do like to hang out near the bile duct. That's where the liver feeds into the gallbladder. Think of the gallbladder like the crankcase in your car. And it's got particular oil in it that needs to be changed. And the mechanic, actually the general who oversees all the organs, is the liver. The liver does enough functions to have about 50,000 factories. If you imagine 50,000 factories in the land doing different outputs, that's what your liver does. That's why the word live is in that organ, because you can't without it. It will take over for other organs that are removed. It is a phenomenal piece of equipment that we are gifted with. And so what she felt was the releasing of things that have been hanging in there, clogging up her bile duct, clogging up her gallbladder. We probably saved her gallbladder already, which might have been something that would go. And yes, bile duct cancer, it is usually caused by these types of flukes. So I had a client years ago. I have a lot of stories. It's kind of like in American Pie, you know, this one time at band camp. It's really this one time I had a client, and it was my job. I was working with my teacher at the time, and in the clinic, and it was my job to be on call to this client who we were putting through a major cleanse out. Lindsay had enough symptoms, am I right? She had anxiety medicine, she had asthma medicine, I didn't even know about this stuff. All I knew was she was diagnosed with diabetes. This all came out after. It's amazing what we hide and sweep under the rug. But I mean, to have this dissipate in a couple weeks, holy crap, literally. But this woman called me up in the night, screeching, freaking out. I'm like, it's okay, I'm here. What's going on? And I was already nicknamed Dr. Poop. So it was my job to know what came out. Are you okay? What just happened? I just passed something. I said, okay, great. Let's celebrate. Not yet. She wasn't ready. I said, what's the matter? She said, it's as big as my hand. As big as my hand. I said, okay, good. Is it flat? Yes. I was like, great. It's probably a fluke. It has a face, she said. Now, a lot of toilets these days have lights in them. If you have a bidet seat, you can turn the light on, or you could use the flash on your camera, and it's not going to bum me out to see it, because then I can tell you what just came out of you. I can see, did you just crap out, thousands and thousands of larvae? Good. You're going to feel better. But Lindsay, it started off with a description. I have to ease people into showing me photographs. Look, I don't go back and keep a gallery. Well, I might. But she described it as, it looks like a slice of kiwi. Well, when they give up, they do shrink into a more of a coin shape. But when they're flattened out for, a photo opportunity, they do look more like a flounder. And if they're big enough, they will have eyes on one side of the head. That's why they're called flukes. I know it's a bummer. But imagine if we were taught this as little children in kindergarten, and we were taught that it's okay and we're going to clean these out. Do kids freak out about head lice and having to get their head washed with a chemical? No, they don't. Do they freak out about having to take little cups of pinworm medicine when their butt's itchy and we have found stuff in their sheets? No, they don't. What happened is what I want to know. What happened? Where did we go wrong? When we can pick them up from touch, from pets, from water, from food, and from the air, where did we go wrong as a society? Calling this the 4 keys to a healthy diet. The 4 keys are understanding your blood, understanding food combining, understanding your type, whether it's your dosha type or your blood type, preferably both. But then I threw in the wild card of parasites for you. And I'm here to help you. Oh, I want to give you a link. If you don't have my book, Unfolding Happiness, I'm going to drop this in the chat. That's my book, Unfolding Happiness. And that does have the dosha tests in it. I recommend you make a carbon, a Xerox copy of the book test so you can share it with friends so they can take the test and you can help them. It's your book, you can write in it, but you might want to keep it clean. And if you're not already on my mailing list, there's a link there and you'll be able to join my mailing list. And then if you do want to have a private session with me, or you want to pass this along to somebody you love and care about, I'm offering you a $50 off a 1-hour session with me. Now, there are people who could have been here tonight who I have helped get rid of prostate cancer simply with a Rife machine. Because you can do parasite cleansing, you can kill diseases. There are things I can coach you in with them. They run off an old computer that doesn't have to have access to the internet. You can download the software that you need and I will coach you on it. But again, that's something I need to coach you on. I can't just turn you loose on that. But if you want to feel like you're constantly cleansing heavy metals, able to do a parasite cleanse whenever you want without something that goes in your mouth, you want to cure pain. I just recently had a tooth extracted. Lindsay will testify to this. She will tell you that I set my machine for post-extraction and pain. And then as soon as the anesthesia wore off, I used 4 magnets, the size of a pinhead, on my face, one on my shoulder, and I had no pain. So there are things I can tell you how to do. I can do it over the phone. I can show you in a video call if I need to. And there are ways we can combat pain and disease that do not involve drugs, injections, and constant subscriptions to stuff that we don't need. And the first place to begin is a parasite cleanse and changing your diet. So thank you. Thank you for joining me tonight. Anybody want to give any feedback about what you learned tonight? That would be awesome. So go ahead and unmute yourself.
I am so glad I saw your Instagram direct message. It was so random that I looked at it because I was actually getting ready to leave. And I said, oh, I think I really need to stay and tune into this. This information is really valuable to me.
I think it's great that your practitioner is talking about parasite cleansing. I question why people don't start with that.
And I feel like working with you, I can just cut to the chase and make shit happen. Literally.
Lindsay, usually the place that I begin with a client, of course, I want to look at nutrition, which is the idea of the liver cleansing that your practitioner is doing. But if we look at Lindsay as an example, she had most definite liver flukes. I mean, it's night and day since she passed them. And even before that, the thousands of larvae that I saw the other day. I mean, it's, I could show you more pictures. I went easy on you. Not Lindsay's pictures, but the pictures that I showed you earlier of parasites are from a very old National Geographic article, and I have all of them. I mean, I can do a single session on parasites. It's going to be you all that are going to help put the word out there. You need to learn from Ambika, you know? Kata, was there anything you wanted to say and feedback?
I'll be very interested in you teaching me about food combination, for instance. Like, I think it's so valuable. Like, everything you talked about is super, super interesting. And yeah, you can honestly just go even deeper because I know you have the knowledge. So just thank you. I'm really glad I came. I learned a lot, and thank you for sharing, Lindsay. Like, I'm so glad that you got checked on time and you actually saw what was happening, because we normalized feeling sick. We're like, oh, I have migraines all day, and that's not normal. That's not something that we should say, like, yeah, I get migraines every day, I get tired every day. Like, that's not how we should feel. But we all live with different. I used to have allergies, and they were because of some of the foods I took, and I lived with that for years. I was like, oh yeah, no, I have allergies. And then at some point I was like, no, I really need to get this checked, because this shouldn't be my daily thing. And the moment I started changing some habits, I realized, wait, they're gone, like, without me even realizing. So I know how important it is to dive deeper into all of these. So thank you.
I'm so incredibly grateful that all of you showed up. Lindsay, I couldn't have done this without you. And I'm really, really grateful that you came tonight and that you shared your story, because, and I told this to you the other day, if you don't start talking about it right now, you're going to start feeling so much better. You're going to forget how you felt before. So it was so perfect that you did this, because I couldn't get into the, the food windows for the ectomorph, the mesomorph, but there's a, you can actually find that for free. There's a fitness guy who talks about you don't have to give up carbs, and he works with a lot of the Hollywood stars who need to lean up and drop weight. And he talks about the eating window, and as a kappa mesomorph, it's really better for me to exercise empty and eat in a 6-hour window. So I can chow during that 6-hour window as much as I want. and then fast the rest of the 24 hours. And that 6-hour window could move. And it doesn't mean I do that all the time. But this is so much more optimum for me. That would kill a vata. You know, it would destroy a vata. And a pitta would just get pissed off because they burn food so fast. But pitta will literally, what comes out of a pitta when they're out of balance is it looks burnt. It looks like a campfire after you put it out. And that's not right either. So I'm going to stop, or I could go on all night because I used to teach 4-hour sessions when I was a university professor. So, I mean, I gave you a link tonight for 50 off of 1 hour. If somebody wants a shorter session, I mean, you can see how I can get into stuff. It's pretty hard to fit it into 60 minutes, but I can stick to the program because when Lindsay first came back from the hospital, I did an evaluation. I figured out right away it had to be a parasite cleanse first. Would I do that with everybody? No, I might go for nutrition first because they might be in such a stressed out place, and it may not be the right time of the month, and for goodness sake, they might not want to invest in a Rife machine, and they got to order the product, and it might come mid-month and it's not going to be as effective. So yes, you know, there's things I take into consideration. And if I wasn't an astrologer and I couldn't look at your astrology chart, which is where I can see what your doshas are, believe it or not, but I still want you to take the test in the book because it'll show where you're at now and where you were in the beginning. And dang it, I can nail it every time with astrology to tell you what your doshas are. But all of this information, you know, I think it's partly because I'm an astrologer, I can back up from the situation and see all the layers and figure it out. It's just a weird gift that I have.
So,
Lindsay.
Ambika, thank you so much for hearing my story tonight and coming and joining us. Ambika, I am eternally grateful for all that you have provided me, information, support, all of it. Putting together this class so we can share this information with others. The one thing I wish I could tell everybody, and I've tried, don't wait until you're sick. Don't wait until you're in an emergency room wondering if you're having a heart attack or if you're going to go home and see your family again.
It must have been so terrifying.
It was very terrifying, and I am immensely in a way better place than I was then and even before I thought I was sick. But thank you so much. I need to sign off because I need to get mine in bed.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lindsay.
But thank you for joining us tonight. And it was wonderful hearing your stories as well. And I hope we can see each other again in the future on another webinar.
We will for sure.
Yes.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night,
Good
Lindsay.
night.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Kata, thank you so much for coming and putting your camera on. I really appreciate it.
Mhm.
And Marianne, I'm
course.
just so incredibly thrilled that I caught you, you know, that you were there. And so everybody who's watching this, thank you for watching it to the end. And if you need my help, click the link. I'm here for you.
I'm clicking.